877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I nearly didn't make it this morning. I'm now doing like 6 hours of sitting, so I'm got to make sure that the whole blood thinner thing is on good spot. I cut myself. I can see it in the camera. I cut myself while I was shaving. Didn't even realize I'd done it. And then I was like, where did all the blood come from? Goodness gracious. Okay. I'm sure you wanted to know that. I said it only for Philip, who passes out at even the thought of blood. We must, y'all, I have a pet peeve, and I'm going to start. I wasn't, but I am. I'm going to start here. This is the President of the United States.
I've told my daughters, granddaughters, from the time they were old enough to understand what I was saying, and I mean it. There's not a single thing a man can do that a woman can't do as well or better. Not a single thing.
I realize people say this, but that's a bunch of garbage. I can stand to pee way better than any woman. I want that on the record. You know what? You know who doesn't actually believe that anything a man can do, a woman can do the same or better? Joe Biden does not believe that. He just put a dude who thinks he's a woman in charge of the Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services. The left in America today does not believe that women can do the same things as men at the same quality or better. They simply don't believe that. They continue to give awards to men who now think they're women. They want to replace women in everything with men who think they're women. They want to replace men into women's sports against women. And guess what? When the men who think they're women compete against the women, they do better. You had that silly soccer player, what's her name, with the fake hair color, complaining yet again. The woman is just a bag of grievances. And she whines incessantly about her lack of pay. This is a woman, for those of you who do not recall, whose soccer team played a group of 15-year-old boys in Texas, and the 15-year-old boys in Texas beat her. That's the reality. You may not like it. You may wish that someone didn't point it out, but the reality is that the boys, yes, Megan Rapone, thank you. Here she is.
I'm a member of the LGBTQ community with pink hair, and where I come from, I could have only dreamed that I would be standing in the position I am today at the White House. I'm also a professional athlete, and I've helped, along with all of my teammates virtually here today, one teammate literally here today, win 4 World Cup championships and 4 Olympic gold medals for the United States. And despite those wins, I've been devalued, I've been disrespected, and dismissed because I am a woman. And I've been told that I don't deserve any more than less because I am a woman. You see, despite all the wins, I'm still paid less than men who do the same job that I do.
No, they don't.
For each trophy, of which there are many, and for each win, for each tie, and for each time that we play, it's less. And I know there are millions of people who are marginalized by gender in the world and experience the same thing in their jobs.
Oh, let's be real honest here. It's not the same job. She's based on ad sales and revenue that she generates, and if anything, she's overpaid. A.G. Hamilton on Twitter has had a great thread about this. The women's teams are actually paid more relative to the men's team based on the revenue each side generates. The topic of the U.S. Soccer Federation pay is more complicated, but people are getting a lot of things wrong. There's actually a slight pay disparity based on collective bargaining agreements, but it's not as significant as people, including her, pretended to be. The revenue for U.S. soccer, the media keeps citing that women produce slightly more game revenue over a 2-year period because they played more games, but revenue only makes up 50% of the revenue. 25% of sponsorships, and those are bundled. The press keeps citing pay from an old agreement, but the new agreement cuts the cap. Under the current agreement, female players are guaranteed a base pay of $100,000 a year plus bonuses. Men don't get the guarantee but have higher potential bonuses based on performance. In other words, if both teams played and lost 20 friendly matches, they would be paid the same. If both teams win all 20 games, the women get paid 89% of what the men would get. In other words, the women's team agreement essentially trades a guaranteed salary for less potential performance-based earning. That's something that even similarly situated employees do all the time. It's part of the negotiating process. The teams also don't play in the same league or have the same competition. Men's soccer leagues, even in the U.S., they're more popular. Game attendance is higher. Tickets cost more. But, I mean, let's not let facts get in the way of victimhood here. Oh, she's a poor professional victim. The woman got beat by 15-year-old middle schoolers in Texas. And yet she somehow thinks that she's in the same league. Let's see. When you believe the mythology, we have to believe this mythology that women are paid significantly less than men. Never mind that a lot of women take off to have children. They have different priorities. A lot of them are more willing to work part-time. They're not as invested necessarily in their career as men. We got to believe the mythology. This is no different than the QAnon mythology, but the media insists we believe it. And they use this woman with a chip on her shoulder so big you can see it to claim that she is devalued and disrespected as a woman. No, her collective bargaining agreement guarantees her pay. The men's agreement does not guarantee them that level of pay, but the men get bigger bonuses if they win, and they win. And by the way, women's soccer and men's soccer are not in the same league. If they were in the same league, play them together and see who wins. But they don't want to do that. This is like, Serena and Venus Williams for years claimed that men and women's tennis were exactly the same. My buddy Jonathan Last tells the story all the time, and I find it hilarious. I didn't know it existed. They decided to play some man who wasn't even in the top 200, I think, in tennis. And he had spent his morning drinking beer and mowing the grass and smoking cigarettes and came in and played and won. And ever since then, the Williams sisters have said men's tennis and women's tennis are different sports. It was humbling enough for them to acknowledge that, we're not playing in the same league. You're not playing in the same league. The whole idea that there are things that men and women, everything that they do together is exactly equal, or women actually do it better, sounds wonderful. Oh, he's so good to women. Oh, I love him. It's also bullcrap. I mean, if we're honest about it, it's garbage. There are plenty of things women can do better than men, like having babies. There are plenty of things men can do better than women, like standing up to pee. There are biological difference between the two. And the whole idea that we've got to ignore biological differences and you're some sort of sexist misogynist if you point out there are biological differences, the left is crazy and the media is all in on it. But we should not have to stand here and nod along in agreement with this nonsense when it is simply evidence-based, not true. And also, the fact you're putting this woman up there and lying, letting her stand on stage with a chip on her shoulder saying she's been devalued and disrespected and she's won more medals than the men so she can get paid more. Well, negotiate a better contract. Get better lawyers. The victimology of these people, it is never ending. Everyone is always a victim. No one is ever accountable for their own choices. She can't renegotiate her contract. They don't want to go on strike. They don't want to do any of those things the left would otherwise say do. They would rather have her on stage to be the professional victim. The whole thing is rather obnoxious. Here's Jill Biden.
How do we value women when they have to work 3 months and 24 days longer to make the same amount as their male colleagues? How do we value the Black and Latina women who have to work many months more just to make up that same number? Equal work deserves equal pay.
Yeah, okay. Equal work deserves equal pay. Let's acknowledge that statement is a statement of fact. Equal work deserves equal pay. But let's also acknowledge the fact that not everyone is equal in these jobs. Let's acknowledge the fact that oftentimes women do take time off to have children. They make different life choices. Oftentimes they work less hours than men so that they can help with the family or they can raise the family. Oftentimes they step out of the workforce to raise a family and come back into the workforce. The idea that it's this cut and dry thing that, oh, the women folk are discriminated against by the men folk. You know what? Who could have fixed this? Joe Biden and Barack Obama. When they were president and vice president of the United States, they had 2 years where the Democrats controlled the Senate and the House of Representatives, and they could have fixed it, and they did not fix it. This is another issue where they would like to scream, cry, complain, and take issue with all of this stuff. But the reality is that the truth is way more complicated than they would like you to believe. You know who's really bad at paid equal pay? Democrats in Congress. There have been numerous studies to show people like Elizabeth Warren and others actually pay women who are similarly situated less than men. Why is that exactly? Do they acknowledge complicating factors in their case? Look, the reality is this stuff sounds good for a certain set of voters, but it's not true. And as they repeat the lie, you know, they keep talking about Republicans and the big lie about January 6th. This is a big lie. You got a bunch of people convinced they're victims who are being discriminated against essentially by themselves. And it's not true. You got a bunch of people who believe this stuff, and it is simply not true. You have a bunch of people who are the posers for it, the poster children for it, who lie about it, conveniently forget facts about it to make themselves be some sort of victim about it with chips on their shoulder. And the reality is it's also more complicated and also much of it not true. Again, though, it's Joe Biden himself who in value and spirit of showing that women and men do equal work or better work for women decided to put a man in who thinks he's a woman as the Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services. And hey, call it a day. It's a big win for women by putting men who think they're women into positions that women could otherwise fill. Why? Because I guess he thought this man was more qualified. Maybe.
Hi, I'm a man. And as a man, I know what men do. Men fix things, like cars or the Veterans Administration. Men take action, like when to defend a friend or tell Russia enough is enough. Men make decisions, like when to take out the trash or fire someone at the IRS. Real men lead. They don't dither. You know what men don't do? Sit down to pee. You heard me. More and more of these hand-wringing feminine squatters are being put in positions of power. And as a man who stands when he pees, this ever-growing epidemic needs to be addressed. You know, Willie Nelson once wrote, "Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys." Well, folks, I'm here to say, don't let your boys grow up to be men that sit down to pee. Because those aren't real men. They're liberals. And I hate liberals.
Close the lid. Mama, don't let your boys grow up to be men that sit down to pee.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 8
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Rocco's is having their first annual Rockin' Affair. Now, for those of you who don't know where Rocco's is, it is a place, Bikers Welcome, in Jasper, Georgia. Now, you're thinking, well, I'm way down on the coast. Why would I want to go all the way up to Jasper, Georgia? Well, they're having this event, and vendors are welcome. If you want to be a part of this, it is essentially a coming back to normal party, May 1st and 2nd from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. both days. They're going to have music, food. There's going to be a children's area. It's free admission to the public, by the way. They want to create a fun way for everybody to get out and start welcoming the warm weather and getting back to normal. Now, you sign up if you're a vendor and you want to be a part of this. You sign up at roccosjasper.com, ROCCOSjasper.com. You can go to their Facebook page as well. Look up Rocco's Jasper on Facebook. They've already got Reformation Brewery, Coca-Cola of Jasper, Jasper Jeep. They're looking for any vendor who wants to be a part of this. You want to show up, have a great family-friendly environment to participate, show off your business. You want to be a part of this. It's their first annual Rockin' Affair. And again, it's May 1st and 2nd, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. They're partnering with the Partner Pickens Pets. So you may be able to take your kids up there as well. Put it on your calendar. Now, if you don't know where Jasper is, it's up. Go up, 575. It essentially dead ends in Jasper. If you're in the Woodstock area, you're in Cherokee County, you head up to Pickens County. If you're up in North Georgia, go down. Those of you up in Dalton, you can get to Jasper pretty easy. It's going to be a big venue. They're going to have, Doug Stone, the Georgia Satellites, the Drifters, blues artists here, Gales. Tickets are on sale now. May 1st and 2nd it is. Put it on your calendar. Rocco's Rockin' Affair. It's going to be their first annual one. And again, vendors are welcome. Go to roccosjasper.com if you want to be part of it. Should be a great time. It's a beautiful area, and the weather is going to be gorgeous by that time of year. I have to say, so I have sworn that I would never, ever do this, and now I have. I've got gym equipment in the garage, and I got to clean it all out this weekend so I can get my car back inside, because I had to buy the monthly pass for the car wash. I've got a black vehicle, and the downside of I used to have a white vehicle, and now I got a black one, and the downside is pollen season. My goodness gracious, my black car is turning yellow on a daily basis. And I can feel it in allergies. I've got to get my allergy shot. Gosh, that is the one terrible thing about Georgia. All these other states are like, oh, we have terrible allergies. Y'all hadn't been to Georgia. And the pine, have you seen the pine trees in Georgia? Those of you who live in Georgia, I realize some of you don't. Have you seen the pine trees? They're coming for us. They're coming for us. All right. Let's go to the phones, shall we? Ariel calling from Cumming, Georgia. You are going to be up first. Welcome.
Hi, Eric. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Love the show. Started listening about a year ago. Actually found you listening to Rush and then continued listening through the day on WSB, and that's how I found you.
Thank you.
So, been very good. But I had a question. Someone called in yesterday, and I think you had to go to a break, so I didn't hear what the response was, but it was about redistricting in Rich McCormick.
Yeah.
And us having Carolyn Bordeaux up here, unfortunately, right now. And so what do you see happening with that?
So I was told that the Speaker of the House, David Ralston, wants to draw a committee or draw a district that would be friendly to a friend of his and make it harder for Rich McCormick to win. The speaker is not a fan of Rich McCormick's and would prefer to carve out a district for one of his cronies. And that fight is going to come later this year. And it's possible to save it for McCormick. I think he should run again or run for the Senate. I think he'd be a compelling candidate.
Him. We met him at our 4th of July steam engine parade here in Cumming last year. And he just seemed like a fantastic guy. We were really excited about voting for him.
And he came so close to winning in that district, but closer than probably any other Republican could have gotten in a district that had drifted pretty much to the Democrats. And Carolyn Bordeaux is a terrible candidate. I agree. She's insufferable. I think if he runs, he can win. For those of you who don't know Rich McCormick, here in Georgia, he's a Marine turned ER doctor. And the guy is just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. I can't believe a guy that nice would run, but he feels very committed. He's a deeply committed Christian as well. He's just a rock star. And yeah, Ariel, I hope he runs. The rumor I'm being told is that the speaker is trying to push the National Republican Congressional Committee and those who will be in charge of drawing the districts to carve it up for a friend of his. And I hope that's not true.
Okay. Well, one more question,
Yep.
if I could. Just I'm 35 and really just haven't gotten into politics, paying attention more to it, I should say, within the last 4 years. And paying attention a lot more to local politics and state politics. What would be
30?
Radio? I just feel defeated as to where we are. And I'm like, what do we even do? Like, I'm worried about this HR 1 bill.
That's a great question. Now,
you know,
look.
we have a great...
Hey, can I put you on hold? Because I got like 10 seconds.
15.
All right. Ariel, let me put you on hold because I want to continue this conversation when we come back. That's such a great question. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. I want to get back to Ariel, who is waiting very patiently and coming. We ran out of time, and I want to get back to this point because, ironically, it's exactly what I wanted to talk about right now. Ariel, welcome back. Thanks for being on hold.
No problem.
All right. So you're concerned about where we're headed politically as a country. If you want to, I guess, summarize your concerns.
Sure. Yeah, just as a whole, like I was saying, just paying more attention now that I'm getting older. And, there's a lot of bills coming across the legislature that, really are going to affect all of us negatively. But just like looking more here at Georgia, I think one thing, we supported Trump, my fiance and I, both terms. And it's almost to the point where I'm just scared about what he can do negatively to affect our Georgia races upcoming. Vernon Jones, they're throwing out his name for governor, and I like Vernon Jones, but I love Brian Kemp, and we support Kemp even through all of this debacle of the election.
Yeah.
He's a great governor. We have a great representative up here, Greg Dolezal.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's come to legislation with a lot of good bills, but, they're not getting through, and I just don't know, I don't know. It's just kind of at a loss for thing. And then you have, Trump throwing out his support behind David Schaefer for re-election. But I think it's just we need new blood. We need new blood in there. And I don't know. I just feel defeated every time you get done watching the news every day. And like I said, this H.R. 1 bill scares the heck out of me.
Yeah, well, it should. I will say the odds of it passing aren't great. Even some of the Democrats in the Senate, like Joe Manchin, opposes it. They can't pass it without his support, even if they got rid of the filibuster. Listen, there are reasons to be concerned about the country. There absolutely are. And to a degree, you have to also understand that part of what's going on here is that the media is so aligned with the left culturally, and they're so dominant that most of what you hear is through that lens, and it isn't always reflected in reality. There are real frustrations, and you're right. We need new blood. Now, I'm going to let you go there and let you listen to the live stream. You'll actually be about 30 seconds behind here, so you can catch back up. Thank you for those concerns, though, because I hear them from a lot of people. I want to approach this in a couple of ways. On a daily basis now, and I'm very serious about this, on a daily basis, I hear from people who say things feel lost, things feel hopeless. They look up in the Dakotas, they see Kristi Noem selling out to the NCAA and now claiming that she's a victim of conservative cancel culture. That's not going to go over well. They look at Washington, they see Republicans who oftentimes seem like they give up the fight. They look in their home state and see Republicans who claim to be conservatives doing things that aren't conservative. People in Georgia, where I am, they look at the Georgia legislature and they think, my goodness, these guys, they're not doing anything they say they're going to do. No tax reform. They just cut it occasionally. No school choice reform. You've got great conservative legislators who are beaten down. You see this in Texas. The great conservative state legislators in Texas constantly being punished for daring to be conservative. In Florida, there's a little more hope. Conservatives continue to be conservative. You got a great governor like Bill Lee in Tennessee. There are several things that conspire and conflate here. Let's talk about it politically first. You should be involved in your local politics. But more than that, what you should be involved in is your local community. And your community should not necessarily be your politics. And to some degree, you've got to step away from the daily politics in order to fix the politics. Now, what do I mean by that? You know, I'm explicitly a Christian. It is my worldview, but whether you are one or not, there's a lot of good advice you can take from Scripture. And one of those best pieces of advice is to seek the welfare of the community in which you live, because there you'll find your welfare. And so many people get fixated on Washington, and they don't even live in Washington. They get fixated on the day-to-day politics of Washington, and Washington is not ultimately going to dramatically affect your life as much as your local school board, your local city council, and it is there where you should have your biggest impact. Working in nonprofits, helping the local homeless community, helping the local battered women's shelter, Doing things like that make you feel useful and in control and improving a situation. It's good for your mental well-being to be involved in your community. You see things that are wrong, that are not partisan, and work across the aisle with people with whom you have philosophical, fundamental disagreement to improve a situation. It actually does you good. It gives you hope in humanity to see the other side working with you on issues on which you both care about. At the political level, focus on finding and supporting good local politicians. Sometimes the deck is stacked against you, and that doesn't mean don't fight. Find a good candidate. Let's take Rich McCormick in Georgia, where I am. In the 7th Congressional District, he lost barely in that race. That race, overwhelmingly, the Democrats had organized. Demographically, it had shifted to the Democrats. He'd built up strong relations in minority communities, in the Asian community. He came very close to winning. He did not win. He could run again. They may want to carve a district that makes it harder for him to win, but he's got an opportunity still to stand up and fight and have good people rally to help him if you're willing to be engaged at that level. If you're willing to be engaged with your local state representatives and state senators in your state and push them and let your voice be heard, and you're not always going to win. But the biggest issue here is not to lose hope. And a lot of people are losing hope. They look at the election and they've lost hope. And I want to be really clear here with every single person. I realize this is my worldview, but I need to tell you, you're not going to find your hope in a politician. And frankly, in my worldview, we're going to hell in a handbasket. We look, I think it comports with my worldview that things culturally get worse. Over time, the culture descends. And it's okay. Because though you can't control all of it, you can control your world around you. You can get married, you can have children, you can raise them to reflect your values. You can send them to a school, a private school that reflects your values. You can make the sacrifices as a family to be able to do it, or you can homeschool. It's not possible for everyone, and it's hard. It is hard. But you can raise them. You can get them involved in a church community that reflects your values. And you can focus on you and your family. And the world around you is going to try to pull you all into the world. There's something clearly going on. There's no reason for me to save this until my Good Friday show, but I hope you all tune in next Friday. But there's clearly something going on. The number of people who are seeing UFOs, pilots capturing them on video, declassified reports showing objects traveling at supersonic speeds, making right angle 90-degree turns that's physically impossible for a human to withstand, or for any physical object that mankind has developed. And I don't care what country you're in. The Chinese and the Russians, it defies the laws of physics to be traveling at 800 miles an hour and then do a 90-degree turn without losing speed. It doesn't happen. And yet it is. We're capturing it on film. Marco Rubio says that these unidentified flying objects are buzzing American military installations. We don't know who's doing it. There are those within the government who have spoken out to the New York Times saying the technology is like nothing we've seen on planet Earth. There's clearly something weird going on. Over the past summer, Americans watched other Americans turn cities to rubble while reporters stood in front of the flaming rubble saying that they were peaceful protests, and your eyes may be racist if you think that it was violent. In January, supporters of President Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol. Some of them built a gallows and noose to hang the vice president, the Speaker of the House, and others. And to this day, most of the president's supporters still won't accept responsibility and say it was the left that did it, even though clear and compelling evidence and almost every single arrest made was of someone who supported the president, well documented to have supported the president. The actress Ellen Page is now Elliot Page, and if you think otherwise, you're a bigot. Time magazine is revising history to claim that Elliot always was, just like Caitlyn Jenner somehow was able to compete in the men's Olympic events and win gold medals as a woman, but not. In Atlanta, there was a mass shooting at 3 Asian-themed massage parlors. If you don't think it was anti-Asian hate, you're a bad person, even though it wasn't. The media that started the week saying it was anti-Asian hate ended the week saying it was anti-Asian hate, but also it was those bigoted Christians and their sexually repressive nature. On universities and the Fortune 500, woke has taken over. If you don't agree, you're a shameful bigot, and oftentimes you're out of a job. John Albers, a state senator in Georgia, supported a reasonable bipartisan compromise on election integrity, picked up Democratic votes. He was mischaracterized by the Kid Toucher Protection Division of Project Lincoln, or the Lincoln Project, and he's out of a job because they mischaracterized him. They won't apologize, and the law firm won't let him back in because they're afraid of offending the wokes. Children are turning against parents, declaring their parents racist because they supported President Trump, and they're unenlightened hicks and rubes, and how dare they? Meanwhile, those same children are collecting tweets of their enemies from 10 years ago and using them to destroy kids, deny them college scholarships, and throw them out of jobs. Environmentalists are openly lamenting that we're having an economic recovery because it's bad for the environment and they would prefer us to all stay in our houses and never come out again. Things are nuts. People have lost their mind. And you've got people who are fretful, fearful. They don't even want to have kids. They want to bring kids into an out-of-control world. What is going on? Y'all, you can't actually address this politically. And I know our impulse as a society is we fight in politics. But we're not fighting against flesh and blood enemies. We're fighting against evil rulers and authorities of unseen worlds, against mighty powers in the dark world, against evil spirits in the heavenly realms. That's Paul. What was true then is true now. We keep looking for political saviors to worldly problems. But the things of the world hate the things of God, and you're not going to find political saviors anymore. You're going to find people who disappoint you, people who are sinners just like you. I think if you're fretful and you're worried, don't hear me saying just sit at home and do nothing. Go advocate for good people and good policies. Don't expect to win. Expect to do your best. And sometimes you will win. Oftentimes, in this culture and society, you may not win. But don't give up hope, because if you give up hope, that means you're grounding your hope in the world and politics, and there's more to the world than politics. In Isaiah, as they're heading off into exile, God says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed. I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." King David in Psalm 27 said, "Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war arise against me, yet I will be confident." There are a whole lot of us right now who need to remember that our hope is not grounded in, nor should it ever be grounded in, the things of this world. We as a people have got to remember that there are bigger things happening than we see. "I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look at him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? God is our refuge and strength, the very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not. I am the one who helps you." Those are all passages of Scripture. We cannot separate ourselves from faith. A lot of people do. And a lot of people think it's binary. We're at church on Sunday and we're in the world the rest of the week. And you've got to blend those two together. And oftentimes it changes your worldview. It certainly has changed me over time going into seminary. And realizing how much I was so focused on politics, it was bending my faith towards politics. And oftentimes it brings you to despair because things don't go your way. You lose the fight. You see a cultural left in this country hostile to your faith, running rampant. The media reflects it. Society reflects it. Well, the things of the world hate the things of God. And I need you to understand this. You can't lose hope if your hope is in the divine and eternal. You can be frustrated, and that is understandable. This is not a call for you to sit home and stay on the sidelines and say, well, the world, it's all going to hell in a handbasket anyway. I'm on the winning team. Just wait till the last day. No, you're to seek the welfare of the community in which you live, because there you will find your welfare. You're to pray for your local community. Don't be as obsessed with Washington, D.C. as you are obsessed with your local area. My last caller, Ariel, was in Cumming, Georgia. She should be more focused on Cumming, Georgia than in Washington, D.C. I should be more focused because I live in Macon, Georgia, on Macon, Georgia. If you're in Des Moines, Iowa, you should be focused on Des Moines, Iowa. Yes, pay attention. Don't check out. Be involved. Find good people. Elevate people for high office. Be involved in politics. But when they lose, don't despair, because God still got this. Psalm 73 was written by a guy named Asaph, and Asaph was in despair because he looked at the world, he looked at the worldliness of the world. He said, these people, they're getting fat and happy, they're never sick, they're getting wealthy, and they hate God. How can it be that the things that hate God are triumphant, and those of us who are people of faith, we love God, we're miserable, we're being spat upon, we're being persecuted, we're being treated badly, they're making us try to be ashamed of our faith? Why is that? And then he had a revelation. He realized, you know what? It's actually an act of mercy. How is this? Because those people who hate you, they don't like you, you're Christian, you're conservative, you're a person of faith, you take it seriously, they mock you, they ridicule you, and they seem to be thriving. This is the best they are ever going to have it. In all of eternity, this right now is the best they're ever going to have it. And you may be bitter and spat upon and fretful and fearful and worried about the future. The future, God's got this. This is the worst you're ever going to have it. This is the bottom line, worst you will ever have it, and the best they will ever have it. So don't be fearful and don't be fretful. God's got this. You're on the winning team. This is the worst you're ever going to have it. Every day is going to be better in eternity. Don't sit on the sidelines. Be engaged. Seek the welfare of your local community. That includes finding good people, running them for office, elevating them to high office. But also, don't be fretful. Don't be fearful. Don't be worried. God's got this. Fear him, not the future. Fear God, not the future. We're going to be okay. The world around us is going to collapse and crumble and ridicule us, and some of us who have podiums like I do, should stand up and speak truth to it. You should speak truth where you can, work to elevate people into office, but also understand God's got this. Don't fret.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect blend.
It is me. It is me. Welcome. Glad to have you with me. It is well. I'm trying to get some emails replied to, and one of the emails that I am trying to reply to, I'm going to actually do it here with you guys. And the reason being is because I actually think this would be relevant to you, and it comes from Linda. She's in Brunswick, so she must be on WBQO in Brunswick, listening there. She says she appreciated, I appreciate what you just said on radio, but why isn't this a call to just sit on the sidelines? Why shouldn't we just say God's got this and wash our hands of it? Linda, the reason is because, and I get this question a lot when I say these things. And first, thank you for listening. The reason that I say you can't sit on the sidelines is because the Lord God Almighty says you can't. And I hear people all the time when I talk about this stuff, well, if God's in control, God's sovereign, he's got this, what's there for me to do? Well, love your neighbor as yourself. Seek the welfare of your community. Those are all things that call for you to be engaged civically. That doesn't mean you have to be engaged politically, but it doesn't not mean not to engage in politics. You've got to engage in politics. Now, what that means, though, is that you should reshape how you view politics and the political process. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of people right now who are angry, really, really angry. They feel like their culture is being disrupted. Their kids' minds are being polluted and the like. Don't be angry. Angry oftentimes comes from fear, and you can't fear. And so if you have a happy warrior attitude where you're going to laugh at the left, point out their absurdity, and you're going to find good people, reasonable people to run for office, a lot of times these days we're finding people who are angry, who want to own the left, so to speak, who want to run for office, and people don't want to vote for the anger. They want to vote for the optimist, the happy warrior. They want to vote for the shining light. And the shining light is the person who reflects this eternal worldview that God's got this. Let's just be good to one another, love each other as ourselves, love our neighbor, and proceed with a morality grounded in good ethic. You're not going to win every fight, but don't despair when you lose, and don't get angry because, yeah, God does have this, but engage in the process. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. It just so happens to be my show. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. The bottom of the hour, the Attorney General for the state of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, is going to join me. A group of Republican states are essentially giving the Democrats a taste of their own medicine. They have filed a lawsuit to stop President Biden from banning drilling on federal lands. The Trump administration allowed it. They put in the infrastructure, among other things. And now they're saying, oh, wait, no. You can't do that. I want to actually begin this hour with things that I wasn't going. Well, no. I'm going to start there. The Democrats, it's starting to become the most predictable aspect of the left. Anything that a Republican does that the left does not like is immediately determined to be racism. It is all racist. It is all bad. It is all terrible. It is all shameful. It is all, it's Jim Crow now. It's Jim Crow in Georgia. The Wall Street Journal opinion, the editorial page, let me read you this. The battle over voting rules is erupting again, and Georgia is back as political ground zero. It's a redux of Jim Crow in a suit and tie, says Democrat and media favorite Stacey Abrams with her usual understatement. The actual proposals that have passed either the House or Senate in Georgia are more prosaic, and we thought you might like to hear the facts. One plan would do away with signature matching, so election workers aren't squinting at loops and handwriting slants to verify absentee ballots. Instead, mail ballots and applications would have a field for voters to write in their state ID numbers. Georgians who vote in person are already asked for identification. The state offers free IDs for voters. Other ideas are a non-nefarious grab bag. The House bill would set an earlier deadline for requesting a mail ballot. Applications would be due 11 days before the election instead of 4. That, by the way, is a bipartisan proposal. The U.S. Postal Service says 15 days should be allotted so voters receive their blank ballots with enough time to mail back their completed ones. The Georgia House would set permanent rules for ballot drop boxes. Counties would be capped at 1 box for every 100,000 active voters. Box placement would be limited to county offices or early voting sites, and they'd be operational only during regular voting hours. The boxes would need constant surveillance by election staff or security. Ballots would have to be collected daily by 2 workers to prevent anyone from being left alone with piles of ballots. After last year, that sounds like a restriction, but it's the wrong comparison. Last year was the first time Georgia allowed any ballot drop boxes at all under a pandemic dispensation. As it expires, drop boxes are scheduled to disappear. If the legislature approves them with caveats, absentee voters would have more options than the 2019 status quo. The House would also order that voter wait times be measured at large precincts. If they reached an hour, adjustments would be required before the next election. On the Georgia Senate side, one bill would let workers begin processing piled up mail ballots in strict confidence 8 days before the election. Some states already do pre-processing, which cuts delays in reporting final numbers. It's a good change, and other states, like Pennsylvania, should do the same. Another Senate bill would let state officials audit low-performing local election directors and appoint temporary replacements to force change. In November, 2 counties initially missed 5,000 ballots. Some discipline might be needed. Now the stuff that makes headlines. The Senate passed a bill to roll back no-excuse mail voting. Absentee ballots would still be available to those obligated to be elsewhere with a disability or age 65 and up. Republican House Speaker David Ralston has said he opposes this change, so it might not happen. But even if it did, Georgia would hardly be an outlier. More than a dozen states save the absentee exception for people who need it. They include such bastions of right-wing voter suppression as Connecticut and Delaware. The House, meantime, passed a bill to rewrite the rules for weekend early voting. As of now, counties must offer ballots on one Saturday. 3 other weekend days are optional. A House proposal would make mandatory a second weekend day, but that would be the limit. One proponent argued for it as a standard, uniform standard, giving voters everywhere the same treatment. But in populated areas, 2 Sundays of voting would be paired to 1 Sunday, so it's being cast as an attack on black churches that urge souls to the polls after services. Only 3% of Georgia's early in-person voters last year went to the polls on a Sunday, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, but 37% of them were black, the paper says, compared with only 30% of Georgia's registered voters overall. The statewide comparison is a little misleading since the latter figure includes wider rural places that don't have Sunday voting. If lawmakers want to make rural counties run a second day of weekend voting, then fine, but cutting a Sunday in metropolitan areas merely for uniformity isn't a convincing argument. That's probably why, in some cases, lawmakers appear to have abandoned the idea. None of this is Jim Crow. The proposals in Georgia are actually really reasonable. The proposals in Georgia are, at this point, they've gotten rid of some of the things they had thought about doing. They're probably not going to restrict absentee ballots at this point in Georgia, and you would never know that from the national media coverage. What you hear from the national media coverage is that this is Jim Crow. Voting rights advocates want a boycott. They want a boycott of Coca-Cola unless Coca-Cola comes out and expressly opposes the ID requirements for mail-in ballots, something supported by a majority of people. Bishop Reginald Jackson of AME 6th Episcopal District said, if Coca-Cola wants black and brown people to drink their product, then they must speak up when our rights, our lives, and our democracy as we know it are under attack. We will speak with our wallets. This past summer, Coke and other corporations said they needed to speak out against racism, but they've been mainly quiet about this. How is it racist to make every single person, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, you name it, put their driver's license number on their absentee ballot in lieu of a signature match? How is that racist? You have to have one if you show up on election day. You've got to have, they'll give you one for free. Coca-Cola is under a lot of pressure. They even, protesters staged a die-in at the Coca-Cola Museum. Coca says it favors a balanced approach. The Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce has said drop boxes, weekend voting, and the like have got to be included. I think you get rid of drop boxes. I think you should get rid of drop boxes. I don't think you should have drop boxes. As the Wall Street Journal accurately points out, drop boxes only exist because we were in a global pandemic last year. Get rid of the drop boxes now. I don't think you should have them. But the legislature actually is willing to allow drop boxes in non-pandemic years. That is an expansion of the ability to drop off your ballot. They require you when you show up to vote, you got to have a photo ID. If you go to early voting, you got to have a photo ID. Adding it to the absentee ballot makes a whole lot of sense. But this is where we are right now. Everything is racist. If the left doesn't like it, it's racist. It's all racist. The Republicans, they don't want to support H.R. 1, it's racist. They don't want to support the Equality Act, it's homophobic. Everything is about making it look like the Republicans are haters. And you know what? I don't think this works for the Democrats anymore. I really don't think it works for the Democrats. I hear more and more from people who are not white who think the left is out of their mind on this stuff. Increasingly, the hysterics on the left say everything is racist, everything is homophobic, everything is transphobic. Meanwhile, the overwhelming majority of Americans, black, white, red, yellow, black, and white, regardless of ethnicity or gender, think that the whole thing is nonsense, that this transgender movement is crazy. The left screaming racism about everything is crazy. The whole idea that we need to defund police officers is crazy. You know who benefits by having police forces? Poor communities, black communities do. But if the left doesn't like it, it's got to be a phobia. It's got to be an ism. And so they've come to Georgia. Stacey Abrams, who still has never been forced by the media to concede the governor's race, says that everything is bad, everything is racist, and shame on Republicans for trying to steal the vote. This is nonsense. It is hysterical. It is what you expect from a media that is increasingly just a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. There is really no reflection of honesty on what's happening in Georgia in the media, including, I want to point out, including in a lot of Georgia media, there's not a lot of honesty in what's actually happening in the legislature. I'm not surprised that they've bought into the Stacey Abrams hype. You know, this by the way, so Vernon Jones in Georgia wants to run against Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp, it's kind of remarkable. Like, I interviewed the guy the other day, and he still says nice things about President Trump, who wants to ruin him. He still says remarkably kind things about the President of the United States, thanking him for all of his help with Operation Warp Speed. And yet Donald Trump has made Brian Kemp the number one bad, well, after Brad Raffensperger, I suppose. And Vernon Jones thinks he wants to run against Brian Kemp. I just don't think that's gonna work for Vernon Jones. If anything, the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to make it easier for Stacey Abrams. It's going to make it way easier for Stacey Abrams to win if Vernon Jones challenges Kemp, because Kemp's going nowhere and Vernon Jones isn't particularly a great candidate. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes up. And the Democrats will be using all of this stuff about election reform. By the way, here's the thing. Let me speak to the folks here in Georgia where I am. I was actually talking to a friend of mine last night who said she had spoken to a group of Republican women, and most of the Republican women in there had been mad at Kemp over the election stuff. And a lot of them were starting to say, but you know what? We're back at work. My business is open. I got a friend in another state. They can't still go back to work, and we're working. I'm making money. Kemp's actually not that bad. And I think that he's got a compelling message. And I can tell you what's going to happen. Stacey Abrams, because she has no shame, next year is going to pull out someone who had a relative die of COVID, and they're going to try to blame Brian Kemp. And he's going to have a really compelling message when he points out all the people who are alive and have businesses because of him. And he should do that. The left is going to focus on the body count for COVID-19. What the right needs to do is focus on the open businesses and the recovery in red states, because they didn't go along with the lockdown nonsense of some of the other states. The polling is very quite clear. The public does not blame the government for deaths of this virus. The public does blame the government for shutting down businesses. And Stacey Abrams already went on record saying that if she had been governor, she would have shut things down sooner and kept it shut down longer. And there's Brian Kemp's winning message for 2022 against her.
Well connected and well respected. It's
there. It is Erick Erickson. At the bottom of the hour, Jeff Landry. He's the Attorney General of Louisiana. He and a bunch of other states, including Georgia and Texas and several others, have filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration for stopping drilling on federal land. Before I get into anything else, though, I got to remind you that you got a great deal from Omaha Steaks if you wish to take advantage of it. If you've never tried Omaha Steaks, it's such a good introductory package, but there's so much more at their website. It's omahasteaks.com. What you do is you go to omahasteaks.com, and up at the top, there's a search bar. And in the search bar, you put Georgia, the word Georgia. And you will see the Butcher's Bestsellers package. In fact, I'm going to do this right now. Why not? Omahasteaks.com. The website comes up, and you put Georgia in the top, and you see E. Erickson News Network. Look at that. I got my own network at Omaha Steaks. You continue to the offer when it pops up, and oh, that's a fantastic order. Look at this. You get the Butcher's Bestsellers package. Now, what is the Butcher's Bestsellers? Well, let me give you a list of what's in it. You get 4 butcher cut filet mignons, 4 boneless chicken breasts, 4 boneless pork chops, 4 Omaha steak burgers, 4 kielbasa sausages, 4 potatoes au gratin, 4 caramel apple tartlets, 1 of their jars of signature seasoning, which is really good. And then if you order it, get this, pay attention. If you order it, you're going to get 4 more chicken breasts for free and 4 more Omaha steak burgers for free. Now, I want to talk about it, and I brag about it because I got a Blackstone, the big griddles. Don't use it enough, but you can make smash burgers like you get from Steak and Shake or Freddy's or somewhere, and you put them on the griddle, and then you smash them down, and they get flat. You can do 2 patties, and you can put cheese on them if you want. I don't like cheeseburgers. Shh. But it's remarkable. And you get it crunchy, crispy, seared on both sides. Oh, they're fabulous. And if you just throw them on your grill, they're preformed patties. You throw them on your grill, they're not going to shrink up because they've got a great burger blend. It's not just ground chuck. They're so good. And the fillets are great. I also usually add the bacon wrap fillets because I love bacon and the fillets. They perfect combination together. But you want to get this. It is a great value. You cannot go to a grocery store and buy all of the stuff that you get from Omaha Steaks in this package and pay as little as you will, or get the quality. And that's the key here. Not only do you get an incredible value, you get high quality, really high quality stuff. It's omahasteaks.com, and you put Georgia, the name of my state, Georgia, in the search bar, and you can get this great deal, the Butcher's Bestsellers. You can get it delivered to your door, restaurant quality meal. It comes with the sides, comes with the dessert, everything you need. It's really, really good, too. I have ordered this. Listen, they don't send it to me for free. I order it myself because I am a customer of Omaha Steaks. And so it's really cool for me to be able to also tell you guys you should be customers of Omaha Steaks. Omahasteaks.com, Georgia in the search bar. I have gone way too long telling you how much. I really do like the company, though. They're a good company, and they're not afraid to advertise with conservatives, unlike some companies, and they also have really good food. I'm on this. Well, so I'm kind of thrown off right now. I'm trying to get into this routine. I will do 30 hours of radio this week. 3 hours, 9 to noon, and then 3 hours, noon to 3, without really pause in between. I'm trying to get up during commercial break and move around. There's really not a lot of time for food in between. I'm trying to get better at meal prep on Sundays, but it didn't work before this week. Things were a little out of control, and trying to get into a routine gets a little hard. And I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to, I can figure out a way to make this routine happen. And then I gotta acknowledge something. So y'all know, a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure none of you care, but I'm going to say this anyway. A couple of weeks ago, I went fly fishing. The beginning of the month, I went up to North Georgia, and I stood in the Chattahoochee at Helen. The water was cold, and I enjoyed it. It was not relaxing. I don't believe the people who say fishing is relaxing, because what I've discovered is you're fishing. You're not relaxing. You're trying to catch one of those little suckers, and sometimes they snap. Like I caught one, and it snapped the line. But I enjoyed it. I got to acknowledge and be honest with the fact that I enjoyed standing out in that water in waders, and I sat at my kitchen table last night, and I think probably for the first time in my life, thought to myself, I want to go fishing. I want to go fishing. I'll go bass fishing with Philip. I'll go stand in the water and the waders myself. I found it enjoyable. And so we've got this outfitter near where I live, Okmulgee Outfitters, and some company is sending me a rod, and I need to get a reel, and I may just go start fishing in the afternoon. I want to hit golf balls. Now that I'm done at 3:00 now, y'all. I have never been done with work at 3:00 in the afternoon in a decade, really. I mean, even before that, I was working as a lawyer, and we didn't leave the office until 5 or 6 at night. I'm done at 3:00 in the afternoon, and I'm finding I'm still sitting at my desk until 4 or 5, coming up with busy work just because I don't feel like I should be done with work yet. And now I feel like no guilt now. I might as well do it and go hit golf balls or go like practice fly fishing in the backyard. I'm sure you all care. When we come back, the Attorney General of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, is going to join me. Big federal lawsuit has been filed to stop the Biden administration from disrupting drilling on federal land after all these companies invested in doing it. and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You know, I moved to Georgia from Louisiana in 93 after the Edwin Edwards David Duke race. I thought there's just no way I can stay in the state. And then suddenly over time, my home state got its act together. You had Mike Foster, governor, drove his motorcycle around the state to start paving roads. You got Bobby Jindal in there. Republicans started winning. Yeah, there's a Democratic governor right now, but there's a great attorney general who's also a Republican. His name is Jeff Landry, and he joins me now, giving me hope for my home state. Attorney General Landry, how are you?
Well, Eric, it's great to hear you. Great to be with you and your listeners. It's been a long time, my friend. Really enjoyed you back in the days when I was out in Congress. And thank you for everything you do in keeping the conservative voice and torch lit.
Thank you so much. And look, before we get into this, I got to tell you, I know there are decisions to be made on the future state, but I was there visiting my parents. They're in East Feliciana a couple of months ago, and it's so nice to see my home state just focusing on conservative policy. I know there are issues with the governor and the like, but having you in the attorney general's office and the like, it's just so great to go home and see like the state is growing and committed to free market reforms in a lot of places and like in the private sector.
Well, thank you. We're working hard. We've got some great people that we elected last term in the Louisiana legislature. We had a great crop of new state senators come in, and we're really trying to get our act together. So hopefully, maybe one day we'll lure you back from Georgia back into Louisiana and many other people out there who have left Louisiana. We want them back.
It's still home. You just can't beat the scenery, the live oaks, the swamp. It's so beautiful. Every time I go home, I wish I could just like dig it up and plant it in my backyard so I can see it, those live oaks every day. But I got to get to you on this lawsuit. So you and a number of other states. Let me give the list here. We've got Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, Utah, West Virginia have joined Louisiana in a lawsuit against the federal government over this fiat by the Biden administration to just suddenly stop drilling on federal land despite Congress saying otherwise.
Yeah, look, we absolutely believe that the president violated certainly the Outer Continental Shelf Act that Congress passed and a number of other laws that are out there in the books, which brought some sort of certainty and regulatory schematics to the exploration of oil and gas drilling on federal land. The one thing that industry needs is certainly certainty. The one thing that America needs is reliable energy that is affordable. And the Biden ban, we call it the Biden ban, fails on all of those fronts.
Yeah, so here, I don't want your take on this, and I remember some of your statements made when you were in Congress as well, but it really does seem to me that there is an organized effort, whether they say it or not or admit it or not, to drive up willfully the costs of energy on the supply and demand curve so that hopefully people consume less, burn less fossil fuels, and they essentially are determining that higher prices and scarcity are good for the environment.
Yeah, what's odd about that is and it was exposed in this executive order that we filed suit against, was the hypocrisy of the exact statement that you made on behalf of what they say. And that is what was interesting is in the executive order, they picked and choose who could drill and who couldn't. So Native American lands were allowed to continue under the current regulatory scheme, but yet all other federal lands were not. So in other words, I guess the environment doesn't matter when it comes to Native American lands, but does matter on all other federal lands. So again, think about the hypocrisy of that. Also think about the hypocrisy of the fact that one of Louisiana's major sources of revenue to do some of the largest coastal restoration projects, which are great environmental projects, is funded by our offshore drilling royalties, right? Again, they're killing that. I mean, if you look at the price at a pump, just think about what the cost of a gallon of gas was last year under the Trump or even under the 4 years of the Trump administration and what it is today. I mean, artificially, The Biden ban has driven the price at the pump up. It hits the middle class. It hits the poor. On top of the fact that we've got to, again, going back to the environmentalist argument, we've got to transport all this oil over the ocean rather than producing it right here in America and moving it down a pipeline.
Yeah, it's. I don't understand. I know that most people don't understand the process by which. I mean, like being from Louisiana, my dad used to work for Conoco out in the Gulf of Mexico before he moved to Dubai, and he worked there. But most of the oil flows through pipelines down to the refineries, whether it's the ExxonMobil or the others, and this entire supply chain is needed because you don't have the refineries on the federal land. It's got to go somewhere.
Exactly. Like one of my good friends who works for the Louisiana Oil and Gas Association said yesterday at a press conference, Mike Marklow said, the oil and gas industry is absolutely able to walk and chew gum at the same time. In other words, we can explore for oil, we can refine that oil, and we can do it in an environmentally responsible way. It was a big deal back when I was in Congress and pushing back against then the Obama administration's attack on fossil fuels. And look at what's happening at the price of the pump. If you want to take disposable income out of the pockets of the poor to middle class, you do it by driving up their energy prices. I could go on and on. Look at the debacle that happened in Texas during the last freeze that happened, a month or so ago, when Texas started to rely on wind power, an intermediate power source. There's nothing that can guarantee the amount of power that we need when we need it, like oil and gas.
Amen to that. Now, one of the issues here as well, and I this is the aspect of it that kind of makes me chuckle, is during the Trump administration, progressives, a lot of them in the federal district court in San Francisco, would rush in and get injunctions against the Trump administration from progressive judges. And it seems to some degree like Republican attorneys general have caught on that, it's worth having these fights in federal court to stop stuff. And if anything, given the Biden administration a bit of a taste of its own medicine that it advocated against Donald Trump.
Oh, look, 100%. I mean, look, I think that, a quote that I made back in January when they asked us, well, what can we expect out of Republican attorney generals? My quote was, look, I think that President Biden can expect the same type of courtesy Democrat attorney generals afforded President Trump at the time. Look, we are going to work to ensure that the rule of law is upheld. We're going to hold him accountable. We believe that and hopefully so, is that the field has absolutely been leveled on the court side because of the number of judges that the president appointed and the Senate was able to confirm, good constitutional constructionists who believe that in the rule of law. And we're going to hold the Biden administration accountable every time they try to break that law.
Well, now I want to shift a little bit from this lawsuit, if you don't mind, because there's a whole lot of other stuff out there coming down from the Biden administration that's deeply going to impact the states. And I mean, how do you see the landscape of what's in Congress, but also at the executive landscape right now that Louisiana, you're thinking you may have to stand up and fight?
Well, look, I think until many states around the country fix their election laws, especially those in key swing states, and the American people recognize, how much the Democrats have basically hoodwinked them, and until we get a change of power in Congress. And then even though, Eric, I've got I don't have a whole lot of faith in Congress to do much, right? And so because of that, Republican attorney generals and conservative attorney generals stand in the gap to protect Americans and their liberties that they hold near. I mean, look, we heard the president talk about doing some extraordinary executive orders when it comes to gun control. That's problematic, flies right in the face of our Second Amendment rights. I mean, we look at what they're doing on the transgender side and basically trying to inject men in women's sports after, somewhat 30 years of great gains that women have made to be able to level the playing field in collegiate and high school sports. I mean, the list goes on and on. We see the problem that's going on at the border, right, which is an absolute crisis. I mean, it just goes on and on.
It really does. It seems like it's just nonstop. And I know a lot of people are frustrated. A lot of conservatives seem to be fearful of it, and I keep trying to tell people, don't be fearful, have hope. And we got guys like you who are willing to make this fight. Now, I got to ask you a question, and maybe you've already answered this, but I do believe there may be a gubernatorial race in Louisiana coming up, and I'm always looking for a good qualified Republican to be in there. Have you given any thought to it?
Well, look, here's what I'll tell you, Eric. I mean, we absolutely need good conservative leadership in Louisiana. Louisianians deserve that kind of leadership. I look at when I run for office, I look at it like a contract between myself and the citizens, and we're going to do everything we can as the Attorney General to protect Louisiana and to protect our liberties. And then as we get closer towards, the end of our contract, we're going to go out there and talk to folks around the state and see what they think and what we need. And, maybe we'll get you to come down and we can share some crawfish and talk about it.
I would love to do that. I am a big fan, and it is a delight to talk to you. I appreciate the leadership you've got in the Attorney General's office. I always love coming. I got to tell you before you get off here, though, when I was home a couple of months ago, I stayed in downtown Baton Rouge, which the revitalization there I think has been great. But my goodness, that city just keeps growing. I mean, it's like New Orleans is becoming a suburb of Baton Rouge, it seems, and now we just got to get LSU back on the field and playing.
Yeah, well, look, you're right. I mean, there's no doubt that the capital area over in Louisiana has grown. A lot of it has done. Look, to circle back to our initial topic, most of the reason that Baton Rouge has enjoyed that expansion is due to the refining capacity that Louisiana enjoys, which is around the capital. Great jobs, great middle-class jobs. And, yeah, if we can get Coach O to put our boys back on the field and we can get the governor to let people fill the stands, LSU will be back on the field.
They will. Go Tigers. Listen, I appreciate you stopping by. I know you're busy, and thank you so much. Best of luck on this lawsuit. I'm glad you're fighting this fight.
Okay, take care. You have a great one.
You too. Take care. Jeff Landry, the Attorney General of Louisiana. Y'all, I need to explain this one to you. So I grew up in Louisiana, in East Feliciana Parish. It is a very rural parish. The entire parish is largely dependent on the state. You have the state mental hospital there. It's like the Milledgeville of Louisiana, except more rural. You've got the state veterans home. You have the state retirement home for state employees. You've got the state prison there. You got all of these things. And so that area of the state is rather poor and is very dependent on state enterprise. It was one reason that part of the state really didn't like Bobby Jindal is because he wanted to privatize a lot of these industries, and it drove those people crazy. But just south of there, you've got this massive refining petrochemical capacity, BASF, Georgia Pacific. You've got James River. You've got ExxonMobil. And you've got these massive oil refineries. And so just south of where I grew up in Louisiana, all the way down the Mississippi River, you have this massive private investment infrastructure in the state that refines petroleum for both gas, but also for plastics and other things. And with the Biden administration's disruption of drilling on federal land and also the pipeline processes, it makes it more dangerous to transmit and transport petrochemicals to South Louisiana for refining. You don't have the refineries up the Mississippi. They're all on the south, largely for export-import reasons with shipping through the port of New Orleans and through Galveston and Houston. All the refineries are down there. So when the Biden administration imposes additional regulation or bans on the drilling on federal land or on the pipelines, what you're doing is you are willfully driving up the costs of oil and gas. You're impacting the American public, and so there are federal laws in place. The Biden administration executive orders seem to contradict, so good for Jeff Landry fighting this fight as the Attorney General of Louisiana. This would be crippling, devastating to the Louisiana economy and to the South, frankly, and oil and gas prices nationwide. But more important than that, if you go down to the far South Louisiana, the state is eroding. It has a lot to do with the levee system on the Mississippi River from the north all the way down to the south. The Mississippi River funnels through a series of levees, and before the 1940s, there was regular flooding in Louisiana, and it seemed to be bad, so they built the levees. But what was actually happening is the silt and sediment was spilling out into the swamp and building up land. Because it no longer does that, the state of Louisiana is whittling away every year. The Gulf of Mexico is further inland. The way the state has essentially decided to solve this problem is actually kind of genius. Recycled Christmas trees. They build up fencing along the border with the Gulf of Mexico, and they drop in dead Christmas trees. And those Christmas trees over time essentially create reefing and barriers that trap the sediment and silt and build up the land. And they pay for it based on the taxes that come from oil and gas refineries. You stop the oil and gas refining, you stop being able to save the coastline in Louisiana. And all of this stuff is tied together. The Biden administration seems to have no appreciation for it. It's a very big issue on the Gulf Coast right now, as the Gulf of Mexico, whether you want to call it climate change, oceans rising, or just natural erosion and land sinkage, which is really what's causing it, is a big issue from Texas all the way over to Alabama and Florida. And the Biden administration seems totally clueless or doesn't care because these are red states.
I really do like his opinion on things.
You should. I forgot to send out the recipe yesterday. I got to get it sent out today. It is going to be the smoked chicken wing recipe. Now, let me. I talked about this. I can't remember what all the shows are running together now. So I am not a big wing eater because they're just messy, and I'm OCD when it comes to this stuff. I hate to get stuff on my hands. I do. That's why I've resisted fishing for so long, because you got to touch the fish if you catch one. And then it's like, ugh. I know. But I have discovered that there's a restaurant near where I live. It's called Piedmont Brewing. They got a great beer. And I finally one night decided, you know what? I'm just going to, they smoke their wings. They're not covered in sauce. I'm going to try their smoked wings. And they were incredible. And the thing I discovered is that you could pretty much just suck everything right off the bone. It was crazy. And so I wanted to figure out how do you do this and get the skin crispy, crunchy, as opposed to slimy from smoking it. And I figured out how you do it. It's actually not hard. I've got a pellet grill, but whether you got a pellet grill or not, you smoke the wings basically for 30 minutes at 250, and then you crank it up to about 450 for 30 minutes, and you get them up to about 200 to 205 degrees, and all the connective tissue in the chicken essentially gets so soft you can just suck the meat straight off the bone. If you get it to like 185 where they're done, it's still kind of chewy, and the skin doesn't necessarily get that crispy. But you get that up, but you got to brine them first, otherwise the chicken dries out. Or you can get Springer Mountain Farms if you're anywhere. I think in the Southeast, I don't think they're nationwide, but if Southeast, Springer Mountain Chicken, they're big in the Southeast. They're big here in Georgia. Maybe you got Tyson's or something wherever you are, but you can buy frozen wings, a bag of frozen wings that are pre-brined. And I've discovered I can cover those frozen. I can cover them in a rub and put them on the smoker and do the exact same thing without ever having to worry about them thawing out. And they turn out just fine at 30 minutes at 250 and 30 minutes at 450. And you got good wings you can eat. In fact, Philip Porch, where he was over the other night, on the front porch, said they were the best I'd ever done. And I did them frozen straight onto the smoker. I was actually kind of shocked. You don't do that with big pieces of meat, though. You'll get food poisoning. All right. I'm sure you want to know about it. If you text recipe to 33777, I will send out the smoked wing recipe. So, what happens is you text the word recipe to 33777. You get back a link, and you've got to click the link and put your email address in. Otherwise, I'm not going to get it. You gotta click that link and put in your email address, and you will get the smoked wing recipe. If you've got a big green egg, you got a smoker of some kind, you got a pellet grill like a Traeger. I've got the Rectech. They're made over in Augusta. They're way better build than a Traeger. If you're thinking of getting a pellet grill, get a Rectech. Look, this isn't an ad. They're just great. They are so well built. They use a heavier gauge steel, so even in the wintertime, they hold their heat better than a Traeger. They're really, really good. I highly recommend them. And I can start my Rectech grill from my cell phone because they've got Wi-Fi built into the grill. So I can set it on my phone while I'm in here on radio, so it's up to temperature when I go to commercial break, which is great. I'm a big fan of the integration of technology in my grill. All right. When we come back, yesterday I mentioned this story about the white wokes of Austin and their gentrification. I actually want to spend a little more time on the story as I've delved into it some, and I've read some more on this. This is actually something I think we ought to talk about. All these feel-good white wokes who want to move into poor communities, and then they drive up the costs of living in the poor communities and start screaming about, the poor people who live in the community around them that they realize they don't like. You want to find racism, find a woke white kid who wears skinny jeans, and you will find it. We will discuss this when we come back and take your phone calls, 877-973-7425. and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number, should you like to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I mentioned a story yesterday from Texas Monthly, and I love this story so much, and I don't feel like I did it justice because there's more to it than the basics. I want to read for you part of this. This is from Peter Holly at Texas Monthly. Let me just give you, here's the headline. They moved into an Austin neighborhood. Now they want to end one of its traditions. Car clubs have gathered for decades at Chicano Park in the East Cesar Chavez neighborhood. But residents of a new luxury apartment building have started calling the police to stop them. Here's the story. The fleet of several dozen cars pulled into East Austin's Fiesta Gardens, or Chicano Park as locals call it, on a recent weekend with the booming of powerful stereo systems announcing their arrival. After a few loops around the park, some drivers, most of them Black and Latino men in their 20s and 30s, driving customized lowriders, bright candy-colored slabs, and jacked-up trucks with flashy chrome rims, packed into a nearby middle school parking lot. Some unloaded barbecued grills, toddlers, pit bulls, cracked open beers, blasted Texas hip-hop or Tejano music. Others joined a slow-moving carousel that flowed from the parking lot into the street and back again, swerving from side to side, occasionally screeching their tires, unleashing plumes of white smoke that covered the block in a light haze. Some variation of this assembly has taken place nearly every Sunday afternoon since the early 90s. But now, many residents of The Weaver, a newly built luxury apartment building across the street, whose website promises renters access to a, quote, community that is rich in history and tradition, end quote, have decided it's time for the weekly event to come to an unceremonious end. Some of the building's residents defend the car club gatherings and note they predate the Weaver residents' arrival in the neighborhood. But many others have grown tired of the loud music, annoyed by the traffic, and turned off by the smell of skidding tires. One particularly vocal tenant, a non-Hispanic white woman with short blonde hair who appeared to be in her 50s, not sure if her name is Karen, claimed that smoke from the tires was killing nearby trees, and that traffic from the gathering would make it impossible for an ambulance to reach her in the event of a medical emergency, though two other roads to the apartment building remain accessible at all times. Another Weaver resident voiced more generalized criticism, calling the event a display of toxic masculinity. We should shut this thing down, a third resident, who blamed the lack of police response on the idiotic city council's decision to slash the Austin Police Department's budget, wrote in March on a building forum. Indeed, at a recent gathering, a non-Hispanic white tenant had flagged two police vehicles and pleaded with officers to disband the celebration, calling it scary. The officers drove off without taking action. Even though the event sometimes violates noise and traffic ordinances, it doesn't pose major threats to anyone in the Weaver, nor does it break other city rules. By the Sunday I went to the park, the building had posted a security guard in the driveway in response to growing outrage among its residents and concerns for their safety. Several angry residents gathered near him. A few threatened to call the police. A frustrated woman from Chicago, who said she winters in Austin and would not be renewing her lease, wondered aloud about the financial toll the gathering would exact upon the Weaver, which is owned by Greystar Real Estate Partners, an international developer based in Charleston, South Carolina. The regional manager who oversees Greystar's Austin properties did not respond to repeated requests for an interview. The conflict between residents of the Weaver and the car club is a microcosm of a larger struggle between professionals newly arriving in Texas, many of them tech workers, and Black and Latino neighborhoods across East Austin that the newcomers are transforming through gentrification, with large tech companies, including Apple, Oracle, and Samsung, expanding operations in Austin and many more making plans to relocate there. Such conflicts have accelerated during the pandemic. Surrounded by new neighbors, many native Austinites say they're often made to feel unwelcome in their own communities. For the car clubs, which gather in public parks on the front lines of gentrification, the feeling has been especially amplified. This is increasingly a problem around the country. What's happening in a lot of rapidly growing areas are woke tech hipsters are moving into poorer areas, claiming some fidelity to, appreciation of, or sympathy towards the minority families who live there. And then they start renovating, driving up property costs, and ultimately the poor families, often Hispanic or Black, have to move out. Some of them having lived in those neighborhoods for years. The Grant Park area in Atlanta, Georgia is another area. That park, the area around it had been poor. A lot of people call it a food desert. There aren't grocery stores and the like there. And a bunch of white millennial hipsters in laws and tech have moved in, renovated houses, driven up property costs, and many of the native African-American and Hispanic families that live in the neighborhood are having to move because they can't afford to live there anymore. The property taxes have gone up so much. And there's a seething resentment. And what's so funny, and the deep irony, is that the woke white hipsters who are moving in consider themselves highly tolerant, highly progressive, highly woke, highly opposed to racism. Listen to this from this story in Austin, Texas. You got these Austin liberals, transplants from out of state who've moved in for the tech industry. And they don't like the fact that going back to the early 90s now, the Black and Hispanic young men have been showing off their cars to each other, hanging out and grilling. Black and Hispanic together, hanging out non-violently, showing off their cars, grilling together, hanging out. And the middle-aged white women who are reliably liberal in this part of Texas are upset about it. This one woman actually wants to put a stop to this event that's been going on since the 1990s because she's afraid that the pollution is going to kill the trees. And these people were there first, and they're not violating any laws. And yet these good white woke hipsters who want to defund the police, undoubtedly want to defund the police, want the police to shut this down. Here's what is ultimately happening around the country, is the white woke hipsters don't really believe the stuff they're saying. They don't really believe it. It makes them feel good to say it. It's a level of virtue signaling. But when push comes to shove, they're going to put their interests ahead of all of these other people's interests. And they're going to justify it in every way possible to make themselves be the victims. This is just, again, the idea here that the smoke from the skidding tires is going to kill the trees, and the traffic will make it impossible for an ambulance to come get this mid-50s white woman who undoubtedly is named Karen, even though there are multiple avenues to the building, is nuts. The idea that this car culture that's been going on since the 90s is a display of toxic masculinity and needs to be stopped. It tells you everything about the political views of these people. They have idols, and they worship them. And one of the idols they worship is woke liberalism. But what you often find with these idol worshipers is they want to worship the idol. They don't actually want to do anything. That they want the sacramental aspect of it. But if they actually have to apply their faith, they're not going to apply their faith. It's very much like the Christian who will tell me, yeah, God says love your neighbor, but these people, I'm not dealing with them. I actually have had someone call me recently and say that, yeah, I know the scripture tells me to love my neighbors, but they're Democrats. I'm not making that up. It's the same thing with these people. Racism is bad, and we need to stamp out racism, but we can't have these Black and Latino young men who've been doing this since the 90s continue to do it. The church of woke is deeply hypocritical. When it comes to their own interests, they don't want to be bothered. A woman from Chicago who winters in Austin, Texas. Does anyone really believe this woman's a conservative? No, of course not. She also, woke liberal, winters in Austin, Texas from Chicago, is going to refuse to renew her lease in this up-and-coming hipster neighborhood because of the toxic masculinity of the Black and Hispanic men who are showing off their cars and bringing their kids and their dogs and their grills together in an interracial gathering. You would think they would love it. We see this in Atlanta, Georgia. We see this in other parts of the country where it's actually, when the left says that being white is bad, this is where it is bad. If you're white and you're woke, you actually tend to be a terrible person. The white wokesters out there tend to be the ones causing all the problems. It's the white wokesters who want to stamp out the toxic masculinity of these people and their multi-decade-old gatherings. It's the white woke hipsters out there who want to shut down car culture. It's the white woke hipsters who don't want anyone owning guns. It's the white woke hipsters who insist that you and I treat men as women and women as men when they decide they want to be. It's the white woke hipsters who do all these things. Now, certainly, they have a few mouth breathers of the left who are from minority cultures who go along with them because they can cash in on it too. There's a lot of cashing in. You get some black author who writes a book on anti-racism, they're going to make a lot of money at the New York Times. You get, what's her name? The idiot who rewrote American history, the 1619 Project, who the other day actually on Twitter acknowledged that whiteness can be redefined however it needs to be redefined. It's multifaceted and malleable. Whiteness fits everything. Whiteness, if you're black and you don't subscribe to the 1619 Project, you could be white. It's an ideological position, not a physical attribute. This is also why it's not sustainable. Every day now, people reach out and say, okay, but what do we do? What do we do? Continue living your life because it's not sustainable. Eventually, they will eat themselves. Eventually, they will consume themselves. Eventually, because it's not sustainable, it'll collapse in on itself. Madness sometimes goes through society. Sometimes it becomes a social contagion. Like transgenderism, I actually think is a social contagion. You've got kids who are in schools where some popular kid announces that they're transgender and watch what happens. It's a social contagion. It's a psychological phenomenon. Eventually, it plays itself out. Now, is there trauma in the process? Oh, yes. Can people have their careers ruined? Oh, yes. Can bad things happen? Oh, yes. That happens all the time in society, but eventually it plays itself out, like the Salem witch trials, which is kind of what wokeism is. Wokeism is the secular version of the Salem witch trials. I perceive this person as a racist. They said something 10 years ago on Twitter. We got to burn them. If they drowned, they're not a witch. If they float, well, then we got to burn them at the stake because they're a witch. This is wokeism, is a modern day Salem witch trial led by the woke secularists. It plays itself out over time. It's difficult to wait it out. What you do in the process, though, is you point out the contradictions and the hypocrisies of it. You got a bunch of white woke hipsters in Austin, Texas, in Atlanta, Georgia, in Charleston, South Carolina, in Coral Gables, Florida. They move into minority communities. They drive up the cost of living there, and then they complain about the local residents who have lived there far longer than them and the culture that they have been raised on and fostered and built up. It is something to ridicule them with and laugh at them about. Not get angry about, but poke fun at it, laugh at them. Enjoy the hypocrisies of the local Karens complaining, having moved into a building that, oh my goodness, these people are doing something for 30 years and now I don't like it because the trees might die. But you know what? It's not against the law and she can't stop it. And we should laugh at her and side with the young men who are in a multiracial gathering having a good time. The wokes hate it most when you have a good time.
Honest news and conservative views.
Never separate.
is still talking. When the hard break comes, the caller and I both get cut off the air. So clock management is something that's key. It's one thing, that there's the rise of the podcaster, and a lot of radio stations now, and instead of investing in local talent over time, are finding podcasters. And they're like, hey, I'm going to take this podcaster. They've got a pretty good podcast, and I'm going to turn him into a radio guy. The problem oftentimes is that they have really bad clock management, and they're so used to just talking. And well, when you do that, sometimes you can't handle the clock, and the clock is the most important thing in radio because you got to trigger the commercials. So, for example, and I realize this is pulling back the curtain maybe too much and boring you. I've got in my first commercial break each hour, I got a 3-minute commercial time. At the bottom of the hour, at like 30 after, I come back at 35 after. I've got 5 minutes. Sometime when I go to break around 50 after, there's 2 to 3 minutes there. It depends on the situation. And then at the top of the hour, there's 6 minutes or 7 minutes and 50 seconds, somewhere like that. And everything is very precisely done. We keep a clock. We have to let the local stations know it. One thing that a lot of radio shows do is like they'll go to commercial break and play the network ads, and we don't make our radio stations, our affiliates do that. I play them myself down the line before we go to commercial break, so they never have to worry about missing them. We ensure that they get played so they don't have to. There are little things we do different just to make it easier on local stations. But man, when the computer crashes and you got to do stuff manually, it becomes an interesting game. Old school radio, if you will. Now, y'all didn't want to hear about that. I want to hear about that. I got to get to Tim Scott. Tim Scott is the U.S. Senator. I'm trying to get him on the program. He's a friend, but he's super busy. And he's got an op-ed in the Washington Post. Here's his headline. Let's set the record straight on woke supremacy and racism. I was criticized in this newspaper, the Washington Post, last week for saying that woke supremacy is as bad as white supremacy. My comments, of course, were not comparing the long history of racial hate to the very short history of wokeism. That would be ludicrous. I am painfully aware that 4 centuries of racism, bigotry, and killings does not compare to the nascent woke movement. As a country, we continue to pay a heavy price for our original sin. My comments were a soundbite-length reaction to yet another media figure accusing me of being a token for Republicans. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time I've heard that type of slur. I spoke out because I'm gravely concerned for our future if we ignore either type of supremacy, both of which are rooted in racism and discrimination. Criticism has included the suggestion that I and other Republicans are living proof that neither racial nor gender diversity is a guarantor of progressive, inclusive, and broad-minded thinking. Diversity, much in vogue, has its limits. In other words, my ideology does not match that which they prescribe based on my complexion. This is woke supremacy. It is the tolerant left's intolerance for dissent. It is a progressive conception of diversity that does not include diversity of thought. It is discrimination falsely marketed as inclusion. This isn't the first time the woke folks have come after me. I've been called a member of the Coon Squad for sharing my story and conservative vision for America at the 2020 Republican Convention. A former leader of the NAACP called me a ventriloquist puppet. I've been called an Uncle Tom and a house N-word, among thousands of other insults. I am proud to be both a black man and a Republican. Because of those aspects of my identity, many critics have ignored things I've actually done. In the past few years alone, my Republican colleagues and I secured permanent funding for historically black colleges and universities, passed bipartisan legislation to battle sickle cell disease, and fought for school choice because poor minority parents are consistently the ones without choice. And yet he's attacked by the left for daring to think differently than them. That, my friends, is the chief problem with wokeism. You're not allowed to think differently from white hipsters. Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. If you are in charge of the finances of a business and you want your business to grow, you need access to capital. We're talking six figures and more. Go to firstlibertyga.com. Spend 5 minutes with them, just 5 minutes, and see if they're a good fit for you. I suspect that they will be. If you need access to financing, bridge loans, you name it, they want to help your company get to yes with financing when a lot of banks are saying no. I want you to listen to this clip. This is from CBS this morning. This is not journalism. This is advocacy.
Madam Vice President, we heard from the head of Moms Demand Action earlier in the broadcast who said the president has it in his power to do something right now.
And the president has said he is prepared to sign legislation.
But he can also take executive action.
I don't think the president is excluding that. But I want to be clear that if we really want something that is going to be lasting, we need to pass legislation.
Listen to them pushing Biden for executive action on guns. There really isn't a whole lot Joe Biden can do on executive action. And take, for example, even his ban on large capacity magazines. It actually isn't a ban. It's a additional tax, a $200 tax per magazine. And he's got to pass that through Congress. This is what's his name? It's not Roger, but is on CNN. Listen to this.
Boy, I have two views. The first is be careful. Do we want people who are friends or family calling federal authorities or state authorities and saying my friend or family shouldn't have a weapon? How are you supposed to investigate this at the state and local or the federal level? That's, there's 330 million people. I think people who say that are saying things that are appropriate, but there's a simpler answer. Look, this will offend you. I'm an American. I'm a proud American, but we live in the United States of arrogance. If you look at educational standards in this country, they are mediocre because we cannot look to Asia and Europe and say somebody has a better way. If you look at access to health care in this country, we are mediocre because we cannot look to Asia and Europe and say other people have better access. We should learn. If you look at violent crime and suicide by weapon, and you look at Asia and Europe, we simply look at America and say we're exceptional. We cannot look at other countries and say we can learn. This country has a problem with arrogance, John, and you're seeing it in spades when we're dealing with these violent crimes.
Yeah, this country definitely has a problem with arrogance, and it is mostly people like that on television. Phil Mudd, he is the counterterrorism analyst for CNN. He was in the CIA, and yes, he thinks that we are a deeply arrogant nation. The last line of his CNN biography, he speaks French. And he thinks we're an arrogant nation. The problem is that it is an arrogance of the left to assume a lack of uniqueness in the United States. That's where their arrogance comes in. These other countries, they don't have a Second Amendment. And yet they demand that we do what these other countries do instead of thinking differently. They want to do, in all cases, what these other countries do. And here's the other arrogance of the left in presuming that we are a nation exactly like every other nation. We are the third most populous nation and the fourth largest landmass nation on planet Earth. So much of the American political left thinks that we should be like other countries, when the reality is that we are the third most populous nation on planet Earth behind China and India. We are the fourth largest nation on planet Earth in terms of land mass. You have the Russia, China, and Canada ahead of us. And yet they want us to apply the rules and principles of more homogenous nations of smaller amounts of people and smaller land masses, as if that's some grand glorious thing. Most nations on the planet tend to have vastly more homogenous cultures. They have less people. And there is an arrogance in the media and of the left to think that we can be just like them. When it comes to healthcare, let's have the same healthcare of nations population-wise half our size and overwhelmingly ethnically identical. On guns, let's have the same policies of countries smaller than ours population-wise, completely ethnically homogenous, without the laws and history of this country, without Second Amendments. On education, yes, let's have the exact same policies of small Asian nation where everyone is of that nation's ethnic origin, who share a same culture. Look, none of this makes sense except through left-wing arrogance, and that arrogance is manifests itself as we're not the best nation on the planet, or we're just like all the other nations. You saw this reflected in Barack Obama's repeated world apology tours. Let's go around the world, apologize to everyone for the sins of this country, and accept that we're just one of 198 or so other nations. We're no better than them. Actually, we are vastly better than the rest of the world at freedom, at capitalism, at innovation, at taking care of our own. Oh, no, we don't take care of our own. We don't have socialized healthcare. You know what? No, you don't. But there's a reason that people who can afford it from other countries come to this country for their healthcare. Why? Because we have better innovation. The problem in this country now is not that we're worse or that we are as a nation arrogant. The problem in this country is we've got an intellectual elite in this country who wishes it was not so. We have an intellectual elite in this country who's decided we are in decline, and we might as well manage the decline, and to the extent they can profit off that decline, they want to. We see this on the left and the right, by the way. This is not a problem of the left. You see this with Republicans and Democrats alike, with conservatives and progressives in Washington, D.C., who make up our intellectual elite, who come up with the ideas that are perpetuated by the parties. They are all firmly of the mindset that we are in decline. Our national identity is in decline, and they might as well get rich while they can before China eats our lunch. They have no plan on reversing things. Decline is a choice. What you see on the left is a failure to think outside left-wing orthodoxy on guns. You see an inability on the left to think outside orthodoxy, road orthodoxy on education and healthcare. It's always about more government control. It's always about the insertion of government into our lives. The left believes that the government should not be in your bedroom. They just want the government in everywhere else, including your bathroom. The government should control your life in every aspect of it, except whether or not you can kill a kid or whether or not you can decide to allow your children to not become boys or girls. Your kid want to become a boy or girl? Let's shut mom and dad out of the process and help the kid who's a boy decide he wants to become a girl. Give them access to the drugs to do it. Their parents are hateful bigots anyway. The government knows best. The left would love for you to be suckling Uncle Sam's man boob for the rest of your life and have your parents have no say in how you're raised. They think that culturally government should be dominant, particularly government of woke progressives. Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina who is black, attacked in the pages of the Washington Post for daring to call out the wokes. And his point is that he, a black man, is a conservative Republican who believes in school choice and free markets and is routinely referred to as an Oreo or the House N-word or all sorts of other pejoratives because he defies the left-wing stereotypical white supremacy arguments of the wokes. The white supremacy wokes on the left believe that if you're a black person, you must think certain things, and how dare you think anything different? There's racism in that, and Tim Scott on the pages of the Washington Post is calling him out on it, saying the idea that a black man can only have certain positions and vote for certain parties is inherently racist, and it is. But the left really doesn't care about racism. The left is actually fairly deeply racist. They just like to say they're not. They believe that if you are a minority and you vote for the Republican Party, that you're no better than white people and you're bad and you're voting against your own interest. The left believes that if based on your skin color, you should do certain things, behave certain ways, vote certain ways. And if you dare to think otherwise, well, you're the bad person, not the white woke hipster who's telling you how you've got to behave. Left-wing orthodoxy in this country is rigid and authoritarian. For the last number of years, the left in this country has screamed as loud as they can that Donald Trump is some sort of authoritarian tyrant who's going to bring totalitarianism to the United States. Meanwhile, it's the left costing people their jobs for daring to disagree with the left on political issues and cultural issues and social issues. It is the left in this country urging boycotts and scaring the Fortune 500 into taking their stances. It is the left going into college campuses and shouting down conservatives. It is the left driving from college campuses, academic conservatives. It is the left in this country who doesn't want you to be able, if you're a Christian, to advocate for your faith on campus. I mean, the Christian religion is premised on the idea of going forth and witnessing. And it is always the cultural left to say, well, that's bad. That's cultural superiority. You're not allowed to do that. So everyone's allowed to do whatever they want to do in your faith. But when you've got the God of all creation who says, go forth and preach and teach and baptize in my name, well, you can't do that. That's colonialism. The left insists you have to behave a certain way. And they do this by telling everyone it's actually the right that insists this. No, we just want to be left alone. The problem is the left won't leave you alone. They come into your community. You've got a community where the majority of the community has come together with acceptable social standards. And then you have the one atheist who comes in and says, oh, well, I don't like it that you pray in school. It offends me. I'm going to get the courts to shut you down. You have a community that actually is pro-life. And you have the one woke hipster who says, well, we've got to have some sort of abortion facility come into the community, and you're a bigot if you want to try to stop me. They can't leave well enough alone. The left invades communities. They're like locusts. They invade communities, and they strip away every bit of cultural conservatism in the name of the one person in the community who doesn't like it. And then if you complain, well, you're authoritarian. All you got to do is stand up and live your life, though. Don't be mad at them. Be their neighbor. Be friends with them. It actually kind of burns them when you're nice to them when they hate you so. Remember the woman who her Trump-supporting neighbor came over and shoveled the snow out of her driveway, and she wrote in the Los Angeles Times, did an entire op-ed in the Los Angeles Times that she didn't know how to respond. Because her neighbor not only did a good job, they did a great job. It was like a professional job of removing the snow. But they're Trump supporters. How can she be kind to a Trump supporter given their rampant authoritarianism, homophobia, misogyny, racism that they support by supporting Donald Trump? And yet they removed the snow from her driveway. She didn't even ask them. They did it because they loved their neighbor. How dare they love me? It burns them when you're nice to them. And you just want to live your life. And by the way, I continue to think a majority of Americans out there, they agree with you and me on this stuff. And a lot of them can't speak up. They get into the ballot box and they keep voting Republican. That's why Republicans did so well across the country, because all of these people, they went into the ballot box. They were too scared to speak up in public because they were afraid the wokes will get them. And they went to their ballot box and they voted Republican overwhelmingly across the country. I mean, the Republicans have come within 6 seats of taking back the House. Had the Republicans in Georgia not believed Sidney Powell's lies, which Sidney Powell now says were so outrageous no reasonable person would have believed her, they would have kept the Senate too. Republicans who internalize victimhood are the ones who cost the Republicans the Senate majority. And a lot of them in Georgia. More than 400,000 Republicans refused to go vote. John Ossoff won by 52,000 votes. More than 400,000 Republicans refused to show up. The majority of the people who sat on the sidelines were overwhelmingly Republican, and they did so because they wanted to be victims. When you choose to be a victim, don't be surprised when you start being treated like a victim or becoming victimized. You got to stand up. You got to speak up if you can. If you can't, go to the ballot box. Vote for people who don't want you to be a victim, but stop internalizing the idea that you're a victim, because you're not. Left-wing arrogance insists that we are just like every other nation on earth. Decline is a choice. The left is choosing to go along with the decline in this country because they think this country is somehow bad. Do you love your country? Stand up for it. One way you stand up for it is stop voting for the wokes and return some semblance of decency to this country and federalism. Respect the process. Let everybody get along. We're going to continue to see the left hyping gun control and all this other stuff. They only win if we let them. Most of the Americans right now, they're with us on these issues. That's why you can have hope. And if you can't have hope in the people, if the people let you down, you can have hope in God. The left may not believe in him, but he's real.
You can follow Erick around social media at EW.
Hi there. It's Erick Erickson. I want to spend a moment on an issue while, so I want to, let me just be real honest with you here. We got a lot of people at a lot of stations who are starting to listen to the program as we start expanding the program and stretching beyond Georgia. And the advice that a lot of people are giving me is, well, you need to talk less about Georgia in the program. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think they kind of understand right now all my affiliates are in Georgia. And I'm going to talk about Georgia at this moment. I am opposed to an aggressive primary campaign against Brian Kemp. There are rumors circulating that Doug Collins may want to challenge Brian Kemp, but also Vernon Jones is out there saying Jones wants to challenge Brian Kemp. Now, between the two, Collins will give Kemp more of a run for his money than Jones will. Jones is kind of a clown show. And Vernon Jones may want to do it, but he's not going to get very far. The problem here, though, is Stacey Abrams. And people have got to understand this. The Democrats are going to present a united front in 2022. And not just in Georgia, but fairly well nationwide. The Democrats are working very hard to eliminate as many primary challenges to as many of their candidates as possible. Here in Georgia, the Trump supporters are trying to unify behind a candidate to challenge Brian Kemp. They got Jody Hice for Secretary of State. That puts me in a difficult position because I like them both, and I'm longtime friends with Jody. I've always supported him. But I don't think that, contrary to the mythology pushed by Trump supporters, that Raffensperger did a bad job. He's not perfect. I didn't support him the first time. David Belle Isle, the former mayor of Alpharetta, Georgia, is also going to run. it's going to be interesting to see on that one. I'm more concerned, though, about Kemp in large part because I'm concerned about the possibility of Stacey Abrams winning the governor's mansion. And the thing that is the best way to stop Stacey Abrams is to support Kemp. I do suspect, if I'm honest about it, I do actually suspect that Kemp can not only dominate any opponent in a primary, but beat Abrams because he has a compelling and contrasting message to Abrams. Stacey Abrams and the Democrats have come, James Beverly, who actually lives near me here in Macon, he's the House Minority Leader. They've both come out and said that Kemp should have shut the state of Georgia down sooner and kept it shut down longer. Now, if you're a small businessman in the state of Georgia, how would you have liked to have been shut down sooner and stayed shut down longer? Because that is their solution. They want to blame Donald Trump, or I'm sorry, they want to blame Brian Kemp for Donald Trump losing the election. And they want to blame Brad Raffensperger for the loss. Their alternatives, in some cases, may not be up to snuff to battle, particularly when the majority of the vote now is going to come from the Atlanta area and the suburbs. I really, really, really think you've got to be real careful with where this is headed. And I think when it comes to Brian Kemp, a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives are starting to realize, you know what? Contrary to some governors, including Republican governors, Brian Kemp didn't force churches to shut down. Brian Kemp has not targeted churches. When the pressure was built, even by Donald Trump, who wanted him to shut the state back down, he stood firm and said he wasn't. When the media, Republicans nationally and Democrats said, okay, open, but only do essential businesses, his response was, well, I can't tell you that your business is not essential if it's your livelihood. If your business is essential to you, it's an essential business. You want to trade him for a Democrat who would have shut the state down and kept it down, shut down longer. Because if you mount a massive challenge to Kemp in the primary, what's going to happen is both sides are going to lose a ton of money. They're going to rough each other up tremendously. And Abrams is going to benefit. Abrams is going to benefit. And that is a reality. And you can say, well, maybe Kemp should step aside. Why? He's the incumbent. And he got the state going. I think that people need to rethink this challenge to Kemp. You may not like him, you may blame him, but my sense is that a lot of Republicans are starting to realize, you know what? He's actually been a good governor, and he's way better than the alternative. Yes, he is. The choice is actually pretty clear right now, and I think that whoever challenges Kemp is probably going to lose, deservedly so, and you just got to ask yourself, do you even want to chance Stacey Abrams?